Hello everybody, my name is Mukhar Chaudhry.
I'm Mark Palmer.
We're here today for a design study for the safe integration of the UAS into the National Airspace System. So the UAS market and population growth, the UAS market has gone from a $15.2 million in 2015 to a $1.3 billion in 2020 market. Due to the explosive nature of the UAS market, an accident seems unavoidable unless safeguards are put into place. As you can see from this graph right here, the exponential growth is humongous for the UAS market. So the current regulations and advisories for both consumer and commercials. Commercial, while we do have listed here, is outside of our scope, but we still do have listed for your information. For consumers, the ones I would like to point out is the altitude limit of 400 feet, that the US cannot fly within 5 miles of an airport, and it cannot weigh more than 55 pounds. There is a mandatory registration that became effective on December 21st, 2015. And also, we also recognize the difficulties of the UAS integration. In 2012, Congress passed a mandate requiring safe integration of the UAS into the NAS by October 2015, and that deadline was missed. So the data collection and evaluation. The FAA UAS incident pilot reports that are provided as plain text, and there are no required fields. We took the data from October 2014 through August 2015. And many of the incidents had partial data profiles where they didn't include an airport or airplane, so some of the information we left blank. But with the data information that we did have, we looked into the date, the location, nearest airport, distance to the airport, distance between the UAS and aircraft, was there any evasive action required, was it within 5 miles of the airport, and was it under 500 feet. So here's our analysis of the incidents reported to the FAA. Our altitude, we saw that 88% of them were above 500 feet, 60% were within 5 miles, 98% weren't even following the NPRMs, and 6% required an invasive maneuver, and one of them was a collision. So here are the 2% that were actually following the NPRMs. As you can see, 98%, this huge cluster over here, were not following the NPRM, and they were in a collision. They could have caused a collision. So here's a performance gap causing loss of the integrity of the national airspace due to the UAS. In 2015, these are actual numbers, but everything after that, each year after, is projected, and so far we've seen that those projections have been fairly accurate. So here are industry solutions in progress. Some of this I would like to point out is DJI working on a proprietary collision avoidance system and geofencing system, and SageTech has developed Mode C and Mode S ADS-B transponders for the US. Well, these are all great individual pieces of technologies, none of them take into account the national airspace as a whole system. They all may be useful, beneficial technologies, but without defined standards from the FAA, it's hard for them to exist. So here's an industry example of geofencing. This is from the DJI geofence system. From 1.5 miles out from an airport, the US can't even lift off. 1.5 miles to 5 miles out, it can start increasing in altitude until it can reach the full altitude 5 miles out at 400 feet in the air. Here's our stakeholder interaction. The research bodies such as NASA, the RTCA, the regulatory bodies such as the FAA and ICAO, aircraft operators, aircraft manufacturers, local government, and insurance companies. So here's a win-win for each of the stakeholders. Research bodies provide the research for the regulatory bodies, and such as the FAA. FAA provides the mandates to aircraft operators and manufacturers. The local governments provide teeth to those mandates, and insurance companies know who to litigate in case an incident occurs. So our problem statement is that as of August 2015, approximately 1.5 million UAS are available to operate within the national airspace system with no safeguard to ensure the integrity of the NAS. Our D statement is that there's a need to safely integrate the UAS into the NAS. This action must be done with proper regards to the cost of integration due to the delicacy of the UAS market. Our system requirements. So our mission requirement is that systems shall maximize the safety of the UAS operating within the NAS. The functional requirements, the system shall not increase the price of the UAS, nor decrease the flight time of the UAS, but it needs to reduce the number of incidents or the number of near-mid-air collisions. So our design alternatives that we consider are geofencing alternatives, and that includes no change, NPR becomes regulation, static geofencing, dynamic geofencing, or managed equipment alternatives such as automatic response and manual response. So here's our static geofence control system. Less than the 3% of operators involved in an incident with the manned aircraft follow the current FAA recommendations regarding altitude and airspace. So it might be beneficial to program the UAS to have an inability to penetrate these altitudes and airspaces. So here's a scenario of a US operator with static geofence. It can't go over the 400 feet altitude limit, can't go within 5 miles of an airport, but it can go into the temporary flight restrictions because there's no dynamic geofencing. So the FAA's Before You Fly app and dynamic geofencing, the FAA released this app to provide the guides for dynamic geofencing. So now you can see that the A drone cannot go into the temporary flight restriction. It can't go above 400 feet altitude limit, and it can't go within 5 miles of an airport. So mandatory equipment alternatives are ADS-B and TCAS. The pros of ADS-B are the cost, and that is mandatory on manned aircrafts by 2020. And the pros for TCAS are passive TCAS, and power requirements are very low. So here's a scenario of the U.S. operating with the mandatory equipment of ADS-B in and out. They're both able to just talk to each other and form a plan of action for collision avoidance. And with the ADS-B in or TCAS though, only the manned aircraft is able to send out signals. It's up to the operator manually to move up or down, or the manned aircraft will be forced to move. So some of our design alternatives for geofencing is regulations, static geofencing, dynamic geofencing, and then mandatory equipment is automated response and manual response. I want to hand it off to Mark now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to start by talking about our utility function, which is the measure of level of safety for each design alternative. We have our TFR ability. We also have the difference between NMAX and incidents. That's from our base no change case. We also have our ease of bypass and the presence of a collision avoidance system like a mandatory equipage binary. Now, this is an evaluation of our historical data. We take the total number of incidents over the total amount of available UAS in the market. We also look at the total amount of incidents within 500 feet and outside 500 feet, and also greater than 5 miles and less than 5 miles. We also look at the number of NMAX over the number of UAS and the number of incidents. Those distributions that we come up with, we break down by month and by week, and we put those in with the distributions and come up with the stochastic distributions that come up and give us our outputs. Now we take our simulated data and we put it into our constant filters that we use for all design alternatives, like reliability rate, the jailbreak, how accessible it is to be broken, and the obedience rate. We take those and put them into the rate of NMAX and incidents eliminated, along with the remaining incidents in NMAX, and we come up with our output for the projected data, the change in incidents in NMAX. We put that with the power cost and the backwards capability and the ease of bypass of each alternative, and we come up with our level of safety. Now here's an example of an iteration of our simulation. We take random number generators, we multiply it by the total amount of available UAS, we come up with our output with an incident with no change, and then we put it with our filters, and that gives us the total amount of incidents for each design alternative. Now, as you can see from our predicted results, are from the mandatory equipage and the no change, that gives us the total amount of incidents. However, for the number of NMAX, an automated response, normally like an ADS-B in and out, gives the total amount, the lowest amount of NMAX. The limitations of our simulation model, it could be the incidents appear to show a slightly increasing incident UAS ratio, giving inaccurate results. Also, some of the distributions may not fit the historical data that we got. Also, the simulation time frame that we keep is only till 2020. If the 23% growth rate that Waqar talked about continues, that's going to make our results a little bit different. The methodology for projecting costs. So we look at the initial costs and the maintenance costs of each regulation software and hardware design alternative, and we come up with our total projected cost. As you can see from, this is our manual, the mandatory equipage options. As you can see in blue, our automated TCAS is actually, the ADS-B in and out is actually the largest, gives us the total amount of 24 billion over 5 years. But however, when we go to the geofencing options, it actually gives us a lot better cost management. The initial cost for implementation is actually the greatest, and then the maintenance cost as it goes. The static geofencing of the hardware, the mandatory manufacturer cost is the most, but the dynamic geofencing when you create the Before You Fly app, which is going to be sponsored by the FAA, is the least. Now, from here, the cost utility of a design alternatives, as you can see, up to the farthest left, it gives us the lowest cost, and up to the top gives us the highest level of safety. Our recommendations, if we join together the regulations, static and dynamic geofencing, will allow increased redundancy at a lower cost. However, if you're flying in a commercial area or overpopulated area or near aircrafts, they're recommended putting an ADS-B in. The earned value management, as you can see from the blue, we are actually undervalued. Our actual cost is actually lower, so we rock. And our projected performance indices, as you can see, we work in spurts, but we got the job done under cost. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.